Hi, I'm Elliot, a writer, and I'm typing out The Great Gatsby. Why? Because that was something Hunter S Thompson did because he wanted to see what it would be like to write a masterpiece. Now that I have some time on my hands, I figured it would be a good opportunity to try it myself. So, join me every Saturday until I finish the whole novel. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Typing Out The Great Gatsby with me, Elliot. How are you? It's another week of craziness, another week of fun, another week of sore neck for me. Since Saturday, I've had a really sore neck from just sleeping weird because my dog sleeps with me. And he curls up right against my body, and then he's over the course of the night he stretches out, and it's caused me a lot of pain, but I would not trade it for the world. It is one of the best parts of owning a dog. So it's actually Thursday today. I usually film on a Friday, but it's going to be a really busy weekend, so I figured I have an opportunity to sort of get this out of the way during this lunch break that I'm having right now. And so it's nice to just sort of fit it in wherever I can, because I feel like my pocket of time, the amount of time I had when I started this project, which in March when lockdown was, really heavy and summer hasn't started yet, I had more time back then, and especially on the weekends. But now things are picking up. It's my father-in-law's birthday this weekend, and some events that I have to go to, not big events obviously, just seeing a few friends here and there, and just trying to organize my time in a way that doesn't stress me out too much. So I'm just trying to find little pockets of time to do things. And it's hard because summer is happening now. Still working from home, which is a luxury by every means. And so I'm just coping like everybody else, trying to juggle everything that's going on, and who knows when this will actually end and when things can go back to normal and we can schedule things properly. But right now it seems like we're just trying to organize everything, especially me. Last week my wife put up these shelves on our wall, so that looks pretty nice. A little home upgrade, so I'm happy about that. But it's just keep going. And today I found out that one of the scripts that I submitted for a contest did not get it accepted. Did not get to move on to the next round. And so I'm dealing with that in my own ways. And I guess it's worth talking about rejections, especially as a writer, how to approach it, how I approach it. I don't know the best way to do it, but I've been rejected many times in terms of submitting my work for approval of some sort, and then getting feedback, and then them saying, no, we don't want this, other people did a better job than you. And so how do I deal with that? And I guess before we get started today, one of the ways I cope with that is that I don't put all my eggs in one basket, as they say. So my attention on especially a creative project is that I don't just have one thing going on. I have multiple things. So one thing fails, especially with short stories or spec scripts or any small project that you work on for a bit, you do the best you can, and then you send it off. And I have many of them, and many of them are out in the world, waiting for someone to read it and approve it. By having more out there, by publishing more blog posts, by posting more videos, I find that if one doesn't do well, it doesn't weigh on me as much. So that's how I approach it, is just to keep doing, do a lot, submit a lot, and once you kind of get into the routine that rejections are going to happen, and the more shots you take, the more likely you are to score. But not only that, now that I've realized that, that wasn't gonna be accepted, that wasn't good enough, I could rework it, I could adjust, I'll find a different spot to take a shot and make little improvements to it. And it's just that process of sending it out, bringing it back, taking a look at it and seeing, after some time has passed, just like looking at it and seeing, oh, well, it could have gone better there. So I'm dealing with a little bit of that today. But enough of this. This is a long update from me. It's just a lot of stuff is happening this week. So wanted to share it, and it's been fun kind of looking back at all these videos and just seeing the progression of myself during these past 17 weeks. But enough about me, more about me later, but enough about me for now. Onwards to typing out The Great Gatsby. We got much to do today. Let's get some stuff done. What am I saying? Okay, so the last time we left off, Gatsby was trying to convince Nick, well, he's talking to Nick about taking on a job of some sort, and Nick is going to invite Daisy over so Gatsby could see her again. They're past lovers, or they had a relationship prior to all of this. We know all this now, and now the plan is in place to get Daisy in the room with Gatsby. There you go. What we're going to be looking for today is we're going to be looking at the fluidity of the sentence, how the sentence flows together, and just seeing if there's any parts that kind of trip me up, or any series of ideas, and just, sorry, my brain just stopped working there for a moment. What we're going to be looking for, our intention for today, is that we're going to be looking at the fluidity of the sentence, seeing how it flows from the beginning to end, and what type of ideas are in there, and if I get tripped up at any point, if we switch from one idea in the sentence to another and it keeps adding on sometimes, you know what I'm talking about. And we're just going to be keeping an eye on that. Just aware of it. Nothing too heavy. All right, let's get going. That messed me up. The funny way that, what's his name, Mr. Wolfsheim talks. Daisy's hilarious. She's probably my favorite character in all this. Yeah. It's also interesting that it jumps so quickly in between scenes, right? It's like, oh, suddenly it's evening now, and he doesn't know what Gatsby did, but now he's calling Daisy. I always feel hesitant to jump so quickly in between major scenes, but I think a lot of that can be dealt with in editing, when you have another person look at it and say like, hey, all this chunk here, I can naturally assume that Fitzgerald maybe wrote a lot more in between this, maybe a bit about Nick going home and being lightheaded and what he did to remedy his lightheadedness and why he's happy and how he wandered around in his house. You can imagine that is probably written somewhere, right? Or maybe another paragraph or two. But in the editing, it's just like trim it down to what matters. Yes, and it's just jumping straight to, and it doesn't even say which day it was, right? I don't remember talking. Just jumps right to it. It doesn't. We don't know if it was 2 days, 3 days. I'm not sure what a fin is, but I think this is an interesting sentence. We were talking about sentence flow. This reminded me, I'd forgotten to tell my Finn to come back, so I drove into West Egg Village to search for her among soggy wet ash alleys and to buy some cups, lemons, and flowers. It's just interesting how that sentence was laid out, because it's like he had to do that stuff. I don't know. I thought I had more to say there, but I don't. And it just starts off with, I have to do this. And then he goes on and does it, among other things. And it just wasn't planned. Very, very eclectic. I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though there's multiple thoughts happening, what connected it was that he was searching for this fin, which I'm not sure what it is exactly. If you know, tell me. Maybe it's someone employed by Nick. Anyways, it starts with he remembers to do something, so that kind of like introduces the problem, and then while he's sort of working to solve it, he does other things as well. So that's kind of what the sentence is about, and it's like linking two ideas: the buying stuff and also searching for this person. It's like he forgot to search the person. To me, there's three chunks in it, which is, I guess, it's broken up in different ways. So I'll say this is the first idea. Sorry, I'm diving a little deep into this sentence for some reason. This reminds me I've forgotten to tell my Finn to come back. So he drives off to search for her among the alleyways and to buy stuff. So just in that sentence, it's like three things happens. And it's just interesting. It's just interesting how it's structured. These are just things we're looking for. It's good to dive deep and really try to understand how a sentence can be structured. I think it helps us creatively when we try to write our own sentences. What tends to happen a lot is, especially for me, our sentences end up sounding the same. Like we keep writing the same length or structuring it the same way. Really diving in and seeing how the different ideas inside of a longer sentence, how it can be structured, and how maybe if we tend to write really short sentences, maybe we can combine those ideas into one longer sentence just to break up the flow. I just love the subtext in the writing. There's so much of it, and it's often pretty subtle. I think that is the mark of a really good writer, when they could talk about something else, especially when you're writing, have the characters talk about something else, but really the reader recognizes what the actual issue is. Another page. it's such a real problem to have a rainy day ruin a very important event. Like, how many events? This is so relatable, actually, because how many events do we have in our life that just gets ruined by like a rainy day, you know? Just something we have to deal with. No. No Gatsby's micromanaging. This is quite a long sentence. Let's take a closer look at that. Gatsby looked with vacant eyes through a copy of Clay's Economics, starting at the finished thread that shook the kitchen floor and peering towards the bleared windows from time to time, as if a series of invisible but alarming happenings were taking place outside. I love it. It just it's just following Gatsby's like perspective for a moment, and this is yeah, it's fun. It's fun how it flows, right? We can really feel that. And it's like for a moment I thought he was just reading the magazine or whatever it is. Looks with vacant eyes through a copy of Clay's Economics. And it just goes. It doesn't really pause at anything too long. It just kind of flows, starting at the finished thread. I think starting is the key, and peering towards the bleared windows. I'm not sure what bleared means, but not familiar with that word. Peering towards, from time to time, a series but alarming happenings were taking place outside. It really creates that pace. It's interesting how it works. Invisible but alarming is also good. So much, just so much in every sentence that you could just dive so deep and dissect it. Obviously, we shouldn't shouldn't do that because it'll take too long, and I don't know if this is actually that interesting. I'm just giving it a shot. I'm trying new things. I'm trying new things here. Sometimes I have a lot of meaningful things to say, but when looking deeply into these sentences, you realize, I guess what I'm realizing now is how incapable I am almost to break it apart, and like, you break it apart and then you're like, what does this piece do? You know, like, have you ever taken apart furniture or something? Like, electronics is very, was something I used to take apart. I had this old VCR that I used to take apart and try to like fix because it would always eat my cassette tapes. This is dating me. This is a little bit. This is back before YouTube. There were these video cartridges, and you watch them in this device, this box, and you put it in, and it projects onto the screen images that move. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is there were all of these little bits and parts, and together they make sense, but when it's all broken apart and you're just looking at it, I feel like that right now. I feel like I'm not an engineer. I'm also not a linguistics expert. So right now I'm like, I don't even know how to dissect this thing. So that's how I feel when looking at sentences. And obviously that's something we all need to work on. And you feel like you're good at writing and English and editing and all that stuff until you point a camera at yourself and you stare at a sentence and realize it sounds good, and you don't know why it sounds good. So I'm dealing with that right now. You can really feel just, it's so concise, but you could feel an anxious tone just by the way he's writing, the words he's choosing, a series of invisible but alarming happenings. It just works. Oh, Gatsby. This is also a good sentence. I like this one. He sat down miserably, as if I had pushed him, and simultaneously there was the sound of a motor turning into my lane. It's just the use of, I think, these two words, miserably and simultaneously. It just paints it all together. If we lose it, he sat down miserably, and we heard motor turning into my lane. As we heard motor turning into my lane. It could be just that, but it loses so much if it was just that. It just creates that visual and that feeling, that, oh, the nervous tension. And I think it's being able to recognize that when it's like, we could really concise it, but it's deciding whether it should be really concise or it should be teased out a bit more, just to actually put the reader into that position where they're kind of like, that they're like viscerally feeling what the characters are feeling. And I think that's the power of a longer flowing type of sentence as opposed to a bunch of short, quick sentences. You could really play with the pacing. I think that's what it's all about. This is kind of interesting too. The part where it stopped. It's almost like the tension breaks, right? It's like we're waiting for Daisy to show up, and then all of a sudden, oh, she's here. And it's just like Drazy. And we could really feel a shift of tone. And I think perhaps this is what short sentences can do. If you're using long sentences to create that tension, a short sentence afterwards really breaks it, really creates, it's almost like you're on a typewriter and it stops and you start again. You know, there's an emotional breath that happens when you use a short sentence after a series of long ones. Of course, you could use a series of short sentences to create that almost staccato heartbeat feeling of a lot of things happening at once, and you're not ready to set yourself in a certain emotional state because so much is changing all at once, and it's so much is happening. I think that's the power of sentence lengths, in especially a longer piece of work. Yeah, I had a lot more to say now that I think it's important to vocalize how you feel about this stuff sometimes, because it's so invisible, you know? It's like what you don't know and what you feel but don't know how to articulate. I think that's some of the hardest things to deal with in life. Not knowing how to say, not knowing how to express how something made you feel. Took to help her. This sentence is also interesting. It starts by describing her hair, her cheeks, her hands, and then it ends with action, right? Then I help. That the hand is what I'm went for to help her from the car. And it's just being able to have that bit of like foresight to see where you're going with a sentence. Because so often for me, it's like I'm describing something and I end up just only describing the thing and not bringing it into the scene. It seems so separate. I think that is a huge skill about being a great writer. A skill that a great writer would have is to be able to link all these ideas in a meaningful way and not just have them sort of floating there on their own. It's being able to connect them. It's super powerful. Okay, before we move on, let's go to Fitzgerald Fun Fact. This is the part of the show where I bring you a fun fact, rather about F. Scott Fitzgerald or this book here, The Great Gatsby. And today's fun fact is Jay Gatsby's mansion was inspired by, I think it's called Oka. I'm going to say it might be Ohika or it might be Oka Castle in Huntington, New York. It was built in 1915 and it is still the second largest private property in the US. Second largest private estate in US. So yeah, search up Oka if you want to. So it's Oheka Castle. Search it up. I really should look up how to pronounce things before I start this show. But no, that is not my style. Pronouncing things wrong is a part of my branding that I'm going with. Yeah, so that was the fun fact of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. It was really good. All right. I don't even know. I don't know what I'm doing. When I started doing this typing The Great Gatsby thing and filming myself, I'm like, no, everything needs to be perfect. I need to say the right things. I need to be informative, entertaining, be all that stuff. About episode 17, you kind of lose a little bit of that perfectionism that you need because all the preceding episodes had so much mistakes in it that the bar has never really risen that high. My standards never got that high. And what I'm trying to say is, if it can only get better. Like, I don't put too much pressure on myself with this, because if I did, I don't think I would want to do this at all. I really don't. The goal of this project is for me to just absorb this into my brain somehow over the course of many, many weeks. And I think I'm doing it. Everything else is kind of secondary, and it's important to, when we do a project, to focus on our main goal, and all the other stuff will come in. Me speaking properly is something that I'm practicing doing, and this is just good practice. I don't take myself too seriously with this stuff. Hopefully I don't say anything that gets me canceled. I don't want that to happen here. This is not the platform for it. But I also don't put too much pressure on myself to be perfect. I'm not cutting and redoing takes. I don't think this is what this project is about. There's other videos where I do takes after takes after takes. That's the place where I kind of tease it out, make it a little bit more perfect. And I think that's another important thing about being a writer or anything creative, is actually go into a project saying like, okay, what is important here? What is the priority that I'm trying to get out of this? And obviously you'll have your championship projects At least that's what it called them. These are the big novels. These are the big like scripts or movie or video that you're gonna make that you really want to spend more time with it because you're putting everything, all this practice into play. So those you want to polish it and get it really tight. But otherwise, allow room to make mistakes is all I'm saying. I'm just justifying why I'm bad here. But I also think I'm kind of endearing being this way. Yeah, these are lies we tell ourselves to get us through, because it's so hard to make things. It really is that you cannot beat yourself up over every little thing. Otherwise, you just wouldn't do it at all. I've accepted I'm not a genius. Once you accept that, you just got, this one life to live. And too bad I'm not a genius. And it would be great if I was. But I'm not. But I still need to live in this little stupid body of mine. And this is all I have to work with, folks. This is all I have to work with. And so you learn to love yourself this way. Only positive vibes. Only positive vibes. Oh, sorry, I skipped a. That was a weird exchange, huh? I don't get it. Was that like an inside joke or like an Easter egg or something? Ferndy. It must be something to do with Ferndy. I don't get it. Well, that was awkward. It felt, I mean, from the point where Gatsby kind of appeared at the door, all the sentences felt a little clunky to me, right? It felt, weird. There's a weird awkwardness there. Tom turned sharply as if he were on a wire and disappeared into the living room. It wasn't funny. It wasn't a bit funny. Aware of the loud beating of my own heart, I pulled the door to against the increasing rain. For half a minute, there wasn't a sound. Then, from the living room, I heard a sort of choking, murmuring. Yeah. Okay, I think this is a good time for us to do the... Every week, I try to see how many words I could type in a minute. This has been a thing I've been doing since, I don't know, maybe episode 3 or something. And so far, I think my record is 80 words a minute, which is pretty good. We're gonna try to break that today. We'll see. We'll see. Gonna go for maybe 85. I think 85 should be the next, like, mark I should try to hit. All right. Let's see how we do here. Oof. That felt pretty good, actually. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing so well that I wonder if I did even press the timer or not. Right? I'm like, this feels like 1 minute. This feels like 1 minute. And I think that actually compromises the performance because you're anticipating the end when you should just be focused on what you're doing. I think that's a lesson for all things in life, is to be aware of the time, but not when it's something like this, just keep going to the end. 64. That's not bad. It's not 80. I think it was that little bit of hesitation that I felt like, I'm doing pretty good. I could have turned it up a bit. So that's on me. I think we're really seeing Gatsby vulnerable here. I think throughout this whole, I think this whole novel is trying to make this guy seem very vulnerable. Maybe that's just Nick's perspective. Maybe Nick see through this guy who is so wealthy and pretty much has everything that he could possibly want. But Nick is really seeing deeper into him. There's nothing worse than going over to someone's house and breaking their things. So, once again, you don't see them jumping into what they want to talk about. They're sort of tiptoeing around the topic itself, and I think that's a very interesting approach to sort of set the tone of the scene, is to not jump right into, oh, hey, remember when we were in love years ago? Remember when we were sending each other letters? It doesn't jump into that. Instead, it focuses on this clock and Gatsby's gestures and just almost everything but until now. And finally, she mentions it, kind of breaking the ice. But could you imagine if it just started with that instead of the whole clock thing? It kind of misses something, right? It doesn't ease you into it. I think a Finn is just a Finnish person, to be honest. Which I guess is fine. Ugh, this word. Whew. All right. What an episode. I think this is a good place to stop. It's set up. They're together. It took a while to get them together. Took this much of the book to get to this point. And you kind of realize how simple the story is. I've never really realized that. It always seems so big, so great in a way. But it's really just such a simple story. Yeah, that was good. That was good. I'm always surprised with what I'm able to just spout out during this whole process. Just really try to dive deep into this. It's always kind of tricky because you don't know. You never know. You never know. And that's kind of what makes it worth doing. It's just so much awkwardness. I love it. I love it. I think this is the scene that it was all building up towards, that we sort of took so long to develop these characters, and then we finally get them in the room together. I think that's what's important, is taking our time to create these characters, to get sort of familiar with them, and then putting them in. That sort of makes sense. All right, I'm gonna leave you with that. Thank you for joining me again. I hope you got something out of it. Once again, please let me know what you're up to, what you're doing, what you thought about this episode. Did anything kind of register with you? Did anything I say confuse you, or that you thought the exact opposite of? That's okay as well. We're all here to discuss and explore, and mostly to get our mind melted into slush. All right, so that's that. I got a busy weekend ahead of me. Hopefully next week things can slow down. My neck, hopefully it'll be a little less sore. It's not like I've been working out or doing anything strenuous. Maybe that's probably one of the reasons why. It's that my body is falling apart due to all this quarantining that I'm doing. Well, hopefully I'll be back next week in a better state. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. All the best. All the best.